Okay. Let's talk about the wide receivers, the top of our rankings. Again, looking at half PPR. Number one, Devontae Adams. Number two, Tyreek Hill. Number three, Calvin Ridley. I will again go first because that's just what I'm going to do here. I'm just my ball. I'm grabbing that rebound. Calvin Ridley. At this point in the week, I had him last week ranked number one. I wish I would have kept him there, but ended up bumping Devontae Adams ahead of him. But once again, I have him number one. And this is under the assumption that Julio Jones does not play because of the hamstring. If he plays, then obviously bump him back down. But we have seen Ridley just dominate whenever he has not had Julio Jones on the field. 21.9 PPR points per game in his 6 games without Julio Jones, 11.3 targets, 112.3 yards per game. Absolutely love Calvin Ridley this week, even though it's not a great matchup, but assuming Julio Jones is out, really do love Ridley this week. And then another guy I'm high on, Robert Woods. I actually have him number 5, which is just ridiculously high. I feel like I need to go in and adjust that, but I'm going to take a look at it. I think there's something there. He has a 28% market share over his past 6 games, 10 targets per game. The Seahawks have gotten better in the secondary, but I still don't think they're all that good. And he has a little higher of a floor because he normally gets around 1 to 2 carries per game. So something that just gives him a little bit of an extra boost. Sean, who are you high on?
Um, First off, I love the Ridley call. I'm so bummed he missed 2 games this year because I think my 90-1 bet to lead the league in receiving yards would have been pretty close
Yeah, it would.
had
It
he not
really
been
would
hurt.
have been. Yeah.
That would have been fun, but yeah, it's toast, obviously. Um, I'm really high on Marvin Jones this week. I'm no longer giving Kenny Golladay a few targets to start the week, so all my Lions players are much higher leading into today's show. So Marvin Jones is popping in the models right now at 4,900. At Tampa Bay, who, the Buccaneers have become a pass funnel defense just because, the run defense is still very solid. They've allowed 4 different receivers to post 130 yards over the past 4 games. So I think this is a smash spot for Marvin Jones, who's been on fire. And he posted, the 10 catch, 112 yard, 1 touchdown game last week against Tennessee. So I'll have a ton of Marvin Jones shares this week, assuming Kenny Golladay doesn't decide to all of a sudden suit up, of course. And then the other guy to monitor this week is CeeDee Lamb, who, probably begins the week on the wide receiver 3 flex cusp. But it looks like Michael Gallup is very iffy this week with his hip pointer injury. So, while CeeDee Lamb's production has dropped off quite a bit without Dak Prescott, if Gallup happens to be ruled out here, I think we can trust Lamb as, solid wide receiver too. It's going to narrow down the target tree significantly. This Eagles defense secondary is completely banged up. So it's a great matchup on paper potentially. So, CeeDee Lamb's a guy where if you've kept him, you've stuck through him all year, he could pay off this week as a wide receiver too, if Gallup ends up having to sit out.
I do like that call on CD Lamb there, and you're absolutely right on the Eagles being really banged up. Last week they were without their 2 starting perimeter cornerbacks and Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox, and I mean you saw the drop off in the quality of cornerback play last week. So certainly something to keep an eye on. Raybon, who do you like this week?
Really all 3 of the Houston wide receivers, but I don't think anyone's benching Brandon Cook. So Kiki QT and Chad Hansen going against the Bengals. If you look at QT, since he was entered the starting lineup, he's run just over 80% of the routes in all 3 games, but he's a high percentage route runner. And so, he doesn't need to get like 90 plus necessarily to make a dent in the box score. 9 catches for 141. Then he had 3 for 24, but a touchdown, and then 7 for 53 and a touchdown. So QT, I think you keep riding him. And then Chad Hansen, he's actually playing over 90% of the routes, for Houston. And last week, it wasn't a big volume week, but 2 for 55 and a touchdown. And the other 2 games, he caught 5 and 7 passes. So he's averaging 5 catches a game, and he's running over 90% of the routes against a really shaky Bengals defense. And then and Deshaun Watson has impressively still been able to, average well over 8 yards per pass attempt. He's been the most, on a per pass attempt basis, essentially the most efficient quarterback in the league this year, which is impressive because he lost to Will Fuller. He's kind of grinding it out with these guys here. And then also, not that you need any advice as to whether to start or sit him, but Allen Robinson's in a smash spot. The Jacksonville Jaguars allow the most schedule adjusted receiving yards per game to opposing number one wide receivers, 91.6 per game according to Football Outsider. So Allen Robinson's in the running for that top wide receiver spot this week.
Oh yeah, absolutely on Allen Robinson. I mean, the Jags are bad anyway, and then they're also ridiculously injured. CJ Henderson is out, Sidney Jones is in and out of the lineup, DJ Hayden is out. So I mean, like all three of their starters are out. So you have a situation where Allen Robinson is going against probably Greg Maben, who's an undrafted journeyman third stringer. I mean, just light it up.
Revenge game.
Yes.
Yeah.
On top of that, I have not to turn this into the Chad Hansen podcast, but I have a kind of question because I like Dynasty Leaguers. I know they're slightly interested in Chad Hansen because he's actually looked pretty good. Like he's looked like a legitimate NFL wide receiver. The question is this just something that has to do with playing with Deshaun Watson? Or do you think that what we've seen out of Hansen is maybe enough to where he actually gets a shot to be a starter in Houston next year? Or if not Houston, maybe he catches on with another team. Do either of you have any thoughts on Chad Hansen? I should just say, I'm also selfishly asking this question because I remember when Hansen entered the league and I thought he was really undervalued coming out of college, where I thought he was a good player, very productive. But either of you guys have thoughts on Chad Hansen and whether this is something that might be real?
Probably not. He's played 3 games like with Houston where he's, caught passes. In 2017 as his rookie year, he had 9 catches with the Jets. He couldn't really catch on with the Jets. And now, with Houston, yes, he's been productive. But when you look at Deshaun Watson is averaging 8.8 yards per pass attempt. It's more to me anyway, like, and he has looked good, but it's more of a situation where Deshaun Watson is just making those around him better. And whoever's in the lineup with Deshaun Watson is catching footballs and getting yards. Now, the worry about Houston, because I think this what you see is like, okay, a player like this, he has some draft pedigree. Perhaps he could catch on with another team, but if he stays with Houston, I'd be a little more worried because Houston has shown this kind of like they only play their starters, and like Hansen didn't even get on the field, or really any of the backup receivers. Like Kenny Stills even barely got on the field.
Right.
When guys are healthy. Now, was that strictly a Bill O'Brien thing? I don't know, because it's kind of the same thing under Cornell. Like now it's just Hansen and these other, like Coulter, the rookie, he's not getting on the field. Stephen Mitchell's not getting on the field. So I would be a little worried just about the circumstances. I'm going to go with more Deshaun Watson here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not likely that Hansen is someone who's going to be a real contributor moving forward. But the 3 games, and granted, okay, Deshaun Watson, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but the 3 games, 2 of them have been against Indy and 1 of them has been against Chicago. Those are 2 like very good defenses, and he's still been able to produce. Sean, I just have the feeling that you're negative on this.
Well, not negative. I think it's right place at the right time. And ironically, Scott Hansen had the best Chad Hansen analogy. He called him this year's Drew Bennett, which, I mean, this is dating myself, but I remember coasting to the fantasy football championship that one year where Drew Bennett just went off in the fantasy football playoffs. So that's kind of what we remember him, and then really did nothing the rest of his career. I can't even remember who the quarterback was at the time, but it just goes to show that it's more of a flash in the pan moment where, he's peaking at the right time, the fantasy football playoffs. That's all that matters. But I think, heading into next year, it's going to be a different situation, certainly in Houston. I don't think this is more of a long-term thing, but if you have him, write him out, especially if you're in a deeper dynasty format, you're rolling him this week. I do like him. Last week I smashed his over 33.5 yards. The betting market for him still hasn't caught up, but I think next year we're gonna have to adjust him way down.
Okay, so at a minimum, maybe take a look at his player props for week 16.
He's
okay.
Kamar Aiken. Remember Kamar Aiken that one year? He just killed down the stretch like the last 9 games. Like I'm looking at it now. Like he never
Kamar
did it.
Aiken. What year was what? team?
2015 with the Baltimore Ravens. The last half of the season, he was catching 5, 6, 7 balls every single week through the fantasy playoffs, and then just like never did anything again.
How dare you compare Chad Hansen to Kamar Aiken?
You're right.
How
Kamar Aiken's
dare
probably
you,
better.
good sir.
Kamar Aiken's probably better.
All right. Let's talk about the guys that we are low on. Raybon, who do you got here?
DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but particularly Metcalf, because if you look at his DraftKings price, it is 7,800. We saw him struggle to get the football early in that game a few weeks ago against the Rams. He finished with 2 catches, for 28 yards on 4 targets. And I do think they'll involve him a little more early, but as I mentioned, the Rams tend to have great game plans against the Seahawks, and they have the personnel to slow these guys down with all those cornerbacks. And, this is also just a dangerous spot to like back the Seahawks or in any fashion, because now the Rams just lost probably the most embarrassing game they could have ever lost, while the Seahawks clinched a playoff spot. So like you just have all the motivation with the Rams. So that combined with the non-let Russ cook kind of dialing it back, a little low on the Seahawks wideouts.
All right, Sean, what about you?
So, I mean, we still need to see what's up with this Dwayne Haskins situation. I doubt he plays after the strip club incident. And Alex Smith might not be ready. So Terry McLaurin, while we can always rely on him to overcome just completely terrible quarterback play as a, wide receiver 1-2 fringe player, I think Tyler Heineke might relegate him to start territory. Certainly McLaurin's been dealing with ankle injury for the past few weeks. That's really slowed him down. So I'm a bit worried about him, especially when it comes to fantasy football finals. So we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully, either Haskins or Smith are able to suit up if you've been leaning on McLaurin as one of your wide receivers. And then the other guy is Marquise Brown, who I have on the wide receiver 3 flex fringe. This is a matchup I already mentioned earlier, but against the Giants where Colt McCoy's starting, I don't know if Lamar Jackson's going to have to throw too much. And when it comes to Marquise Brown, he's a high risk, high reward player. I love playing him in DFS GPPs, but when it comes to season long head to head, finals, it's more of a cash game play. So you do want a receiver with a higher floor. So, I'm going to be rolling with guys like, Cole Beasley, who has a much higher floor than Marquise Brown, who I have projected in this range. So, when it comes to a guy like Marquise Brown, you got to be careful. We love his upside, but he does carry a pretty low floor this week. So if you're a bigger favorite, definitely go the safer route. If you're a big underdog, by all means, start a guy like Marquise Brown. He certainly has the ceiling that you need, but just he's one of those guys on the sit-start cusp that I'm going to be a bit cautious this week.
Okay, a guy I am very low on, much lower than I probably should be, is Adam Thielen. I think he's the clear number 2 receiver at this point with the Vikings behind rookie Justin Jefferson. He has 13 touchdowns in 13 games, which that's amazing. It really makes me think of Antonio Brown a couple of years ago, where he was getting outplayed by the younger guy, but he was sort of covering it up with touchdowns. They're scheming him the ball near the goal line, but touchdowns are fickle without overall volume. And in Thielen's past 4 games, he has just a 22% market share, 7.2 targets per game. Over the past 2 weeks, 3.5 targets per game, and 11% target share. And you compare that to Justin Jefferson, who has 9.5 targets and a 29% target share over the past 2 games. And maybe some of that is because, Thielen returned from injury, maybe he's still a little bit banged up, whatever it is. But I don't think it's a situation where Thielen is, sort of like a locked in number 1. If you have him, you're still starting him. He's still I think a wide receiver too, but his ceilings aren't nearly as high as they used to be, just because he is not getting the target volume that he had in previous seasons. And then look at the matchup. The Saints are one of the better pass defenses in the league. So it's not as if he has that going for him. So overall, just a little bit down on Adam Thielen this week. Sean, give us that sweet player prop.
So I'm going to go with T.Y. Hilton this week, who I think is going to be one of those players that's sort of on the sit-start cusp of the wide receiver 3 flex group. Last week he was held in check for much of that game. We thought it was a pretty easy matchup against the Texans. He's a guy that people have probably left on their bench all season long, but lately he's been wide receiver 2-3 kind of player. Faces the Steelers this week. So A, can you guys trust him as a wide receiver 3? And B, are you taking over under 62.5 receiving yards for T.Y. Hilton this week?
I'm taking the under. I have him at 55. I have him as a low end wide receiver 3 in half PPR. He's my wide receiver 34, so he's not completely out of the out of that mix. But if you look at his routes run per dropback since coming back from injury, 83, 76, 74, 87, 86, and 80%. So he's not getting that true Chad Hansen like wide receiver 1 workload. And against a team like Pittsburgh, that does create a little more variance, just coming off the field for a snap here or there. Because this Pittsburgh defense, they obviously have lost some pieces, especially at the linebacker position. It's a little tougher for them in zones and things like that, but they're still one of the best pass defenses in the league. And you look at their DVOA rating, they're still number 1, in pass defense. And it's just a matchup that, I think if you have a guy in a similar spot, definitely check the rankings, because there's going to be a lot of guys I think you can start over Ty this week.
I'm going to take the over, but I don't like it. I don't feel good about it. I'll just say that. But we have seen him do well recently. And I think a lot of that is the fact that now he's just healthy. And what is his market share over the past month? I think it's over 20, maybe around 21, 22, leads the team. If he has that kind of market share, I think he has a pretty decent chance of hitting the over. But the Steelers' pass defense is pretty good. But we have seen that entire team in general just take a step back over the past 3 weeks. So I will go over, but I hate myself doing it.